So it seems that a lot of big names are there in Guizhou to attend the summit, and the event is seen as a way for China, for the Chinese government to bring its technology investment to its less developed interior regions. So tell us why Guizhou has been a choice to host this event, and what kind of potential does it have?
Sure. Well, I think from a national economic development perspective, I mean, it helps equalize the disparity amongst different provinces in China. So I think that's one important reason that this is an important opportunity for Guizhou. And then why data centers? So I think it's very important. One of the important cost drivers for data centers is electricity, the availability and cost of electricity, and Guizhou is very strong in that regard. And also, one of the biggest costs of operating a data center is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So with Guizhou's more temperate climate, that also, I think, gives it an important advantage.
So your consideration is primarily geological. What about you, the other two gentlemen? We'd like to have your insight on this, Mr. Bastin. Seems that we have communications problem with Mr. Bastin, and let's turn this question to Mr. Zoldan in New York. What are the competitive edges, do you think, that Guizhou can offer?
Well, I mean, I think it's great on several levels. First of all, getting these conferences and these conventions, and more importantly, these conversations in cities that need the help, that need some kind of economic boom, I think is really critical. And it's very, very important, not only socially, but geographically also. These conferences, they're attended by 20, 30, 40,000 people. It's good for small business owners. It's good for individuals, and it's good for large corporations. So overall, I think getting these conferences, getting these conversations, specifically as it relates to big data analytics, which is an industry, quite frankly, where we're just scratching the surface, it's great. And I think it's a great move for the conference to be there.
And we know that big data has only blossomed in the last 5 years or so, but there are already many fascinating ways to make use of these data. So which countries are leading the way in this, and where does China stand now in the development of this revolution?
Well, I think American companies like IBM, are very well known for some of their breakthroughs, like Watson and things like that. But I think China's made enormous progress in the last few years, and especially when you look at the number of graduates, the number of companies like Didi, like Alibaba and Tencent, that have enormous data sets, as well as increasingly experienced technical staff to take advantage of that data. So I think the outlook for China to catch up and close that gap is actually very, very promising.
All right, and Mr. Zoldan,
I happen to agree.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, he's making a great point. I would push back a little bit to say that obviously China has the numbers. They have the human capital, but what I think the country needs is that they need better cooperation between other countries on the execution side, on understanding the data better. Listen, data's been around since the Stone Age. There's very little value in the actual raw data without the interpretation of the data, and then thereby also being able to monetize the data or understanding the data. Countries like Israel is coming out with extraordinary technology for us to be able to understand, translate, and break down a lot of that raw data. So encouraging trade between China and other countries, China and the US, China and Israel, I think is going to be critical in terms of filling the gap.
All right, now we have some figures to help us better understand the situation in terms of big data in the world. A recent survey of over 1,000 companies around the world showed that although the awareness of big data's importance is significant and widespread, only 1 in 4 companies are able to leverage big data to boost productivity and create value. North American companies who have a longer history of working with big data and whose universities have led the way stand above the average mark. So, gentlemen, given the fact that benefits of using big data are so well known, why is it that only 1 in 4 companies utilizes this technology?
Well, I think you have to go through a three-step process to use big data effectively. So first, you have to gather the data in a format that allows it to be analyzed. Second, you have to have the proper analytical tools to find the insights and the actionable recommendations. But finally, and I think this is where a lot of companies struggle, you have to have the organizational structure to actually implement those predictions or those the results of that analysis. And particularly in medium to larger companies, that can be very, very difficult because they have established systems and procedures in place. And it takes time to make those changes, but it also takes a lot of executive will to, in a way, force those changes through the organization.
Right. It seems that big data is transforming the way we live and the way we do business. So, Mr. Zoldan, what do you see as the strengths or weaknesses of Chinese companies when it comes to the utilization of big data?
Well, obviously, the big concern, the moment anyone hears the word big data, right away, privacy usually comes to mind. So the fact that we're addressing the issue, the fact that we're having that conversation, I think is very, very important. And again, whenever you have a complicated ecosystem, and certainly big data is a very complicated ecosystem, there's always going to be pockets of efficiency. And that right now, I think that pocket of inefficiency is really the big privacy issue. But as standards get created, I think people are going to be becoming a lot more comfortable with it to be able to turn over the data, and I think that gap is gonna close as well. And I want to mention also, understanding big data is very important for small businesses because it enables us to be able to move from a reactive stage to a proactive stage, which is very, very important in terms of getting ahead of the curve, understanding your business model, and actually making money. So you have the raw data. If you're able to translate the data, break it down, understand it, and get ahead of the curve, gives you a huge, huge competitive edge against some of your competitors.
And I think another important point to add to that is that big data is also an important equalizer, because you look at Amazon Web Services, some other of these software as a service type tools, it gives sort of the big data, the big company, big data analytical capability to small companies as well, or increasingly more available to small companies, and gives them that same kind of potential competitive edge.
And now let's turn to Professor Bastin. He's joining us from Southampton, UK. We've been discussing the situation. Where does China stand now in this big data revolution? What do you see as the strength in China's big data industry?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
What do you identify as the advantages of Chinese companies when it comes to the utilization, the acquisition of big data?
The advantages?
Yes.
Well, I think the advantages are fairly huge. I think the Chinese technology sector is set for major international expansion and emergence following it, the likes of Huawei and Lenovo, and big data and data analytics is really going to be an area where they can really show what they're capable of. I think we're seeing a new generation now of Chinese technology company, both small and large, and this is really going to be an accelerated path towards international expansion and really quite some dominance. So I think it's a very, very exciting time for the Chinese technology sector. And what's happening in Guiyang at the moment is a very, very positive step along that road. So huge benefits, and I think China's ready to capitalize on that.
And now it seems that everything has something to do with big data. But the problem is many companies, they are eager to acquire data. They're eager to predict consumer behaviors from these data, but they do not have specific plans or knowledge of how to use this data. And that's why the government has promised its help. It's rolled out an Internet Plus strategy to integrate mobile internet, cloud computing, and the big data to its manufacturing industry. So how exactly will this plan help transform the business sector?
Well, I think clearly in a place like China, but in China, especially where the government is so important in terms of setting policy, that the fact that the government has made this a priority, I think will be very important in accelerating the adoption of big data, whether it's in manufacturing or even in mining, a very traditional industry that is not immediately obvious what digitization might bring, but actually can add enormous value as well.
So big data, Mr. Bastin, big data has potential to predict consumer behaviors, but do you think one day it'll have the potential to alter consumer behaviors?
I certainly think so. I think we're still in its infancy. I think we have to accept that big data and data analytics is something that's still fairly new. So what the future holds, nobody could be terribly sure, but certainly that this will be a major aspect of the world economy, and I think Chinese companies are very, very well equipped to utilize this. So it'll be an interesting few years ahead. And as I just said, 2 or 3 Chinese companies are really very well placed now to capitalize and dominate further.
And Mr. Zoldan, I'd like to ask you this. Some critics have been saying that big data in China is overhyped, and they argue that the industry is full of bubbles and there's hot money going around. Do you agree with this?
No, not at all. I mean, I think the challenge is where the hype is really just in the term, in the word big data. The term big data is thrown around so loosely, nobody really knows what it means other than it's a fun word to use. But in terms of the industry being hyped or in a bubble, absolutely not. We haven't even scratched the surface. In fact, I think we're at the point where it's just, at this point, it's a conversation. Standards are being created. We're starting to understand that there's a market here. But in terms of it being inflated or hyped, absolutely not. What I would say, though, it's important, I think, for the Chinese government as well and the industry at whole to be able to encourage small businesses to be able to get a hold of this data and to play in this space. There are a lot of small companies right now in the United States that are flourishing, companies like Pipestream and UpChannel, that are focused on conversational commerce, where these large companies are able to interact via IM or chats or bots directly to the end user. So there's a lot of value there. It's a great conversation to have, and again, we're just at the starting point. We haven't really started to be able to monetize in a way where the potential is for big data.
Mr. Zoldan thinks that we are at the starting point. What about you, Andy? Do you agree that big data in China is being inflated?
I don't think it's being inflated at all. So I do agree that I think we're really at the beginning stages, because as the Internet Plus strategy also is implemented, there's more and more data available. I think of big data as clearly, all of the data that can be gathered from sensors through video, through weather sensors, traffic sensors, and more data is becoming available to be analyzed. And we're making a lot of advances in the analytics side as well, particularly with AI. You mentioned about some of the conversational commerce operator. There's other companies like that also using hybrid approaches to use big data here in the sense of unstructured information, so text to make better decisions and better predictions. So I agree. I don't think it's a bubble at all, and we're just at the beginning.
Mr. Bastin, your view on this?
I think we are at a turning point. I think it's what you said. I disagree. I think we will see perhaps revolutionary, certainly exponential change when it comes to the acquisition, the understanding and the use of big data and technology, typically with younger generations in the driving seat. So I think we could see real change very, very soon.
And another problem, gentlemen, with big data is that big data are too fast, too big, and too diverse to be understood by traditional analytical methods. So it seems that a whole new set of technologies and human capital are also being built around it. Do you think that the big data industry has potential to become the key driver of the economy in the future? Andy?
I do, and big data, depending on how we define it, and again, I agree, sometimes it's loosely used, but one subtle risk I think that we face is that as we get so much diverse data and our algorithms get so much better at making predictions, that humans lose the capability, they fall behind, and that we can't understand why these things are happening. Like, why are we getting these predictions? They're right and they work, but we don't understand, and that potentially is dangerous.
So what is the long-term impact on the economy, on people's daily lives, Mr. Zoldan, that big data can provide or in some way could change our lives?
And I think overall, and I guess I'm using that term relatively loosely, but overall, it's going to enhance our life, enhance our economy and our overall well-being, and it's about, I think there's an element of ease there. There's a lot of plug-and-play opportunities also. And what I wanted to mention also is that the cross-border opportunities, whether it's Israel and China, the United States and China, to be able to share a lot of this data also, even as it relates to world crisis or to healthcare or innovation, I really think is going to make the world a better place. And there are companies like Powerlinks based in New York as well that's encouraging trade between U.S. and China and U.S. overseas to be able to outsource products more effectively. So overall, I would say, and again, I use it loosely, taking out the privacy concerns, which rightfully so is an issue. Overall, it's going to be able to enhance our lives on a day-to-day basis.
So it seems that the privacy issue is very important in the big data industry. I mean, the wealth of information is often vulnerable to hacking, and then people's digital presence can be used to invade their privacy. So, Mr. Bastin, how concerned are you in this?
Well, I have to say that there are concerns. I think they're quite widespread and genuine concerns about piracy and privacy, but I think those will recede. I think it's such a new thing now. Technology is advancing so quickly that a lot of people find it difficult to accept this change and feel nervous just because it's something that's largely unknown or so very, very new. I think once we proceed a few years down the line, we'll see that concerns about privacy and piracy will decline. It's probably an area where government needs to do more. Governments need to work harder with the private sector, so better relations between private sector technology firms and national governments, and it needs to appear on the agenda at major summits, G8, G7 and G20. But I think it's not a major concern in the long term. It's only a short-term thing.
So big data could become bigger in the future. Thank you so much, gentlemen.